an overview of why validated solutions now exist, and the evolution from VVDs. And then I'll hand over to Ryan, who will do a bit of a deep dive on one of said solutions that we have currently available. So let's jump into the slides. So as kind of already mentioned, the validated solutions, which I'm going to refer to as VVS from here on in, just because it's easy to say. The idea is that it is an evolution of what we had in terms of VVD. So those that are familiar with the validated designs, we built those, I suppose, 6 years ago. So I've been in the team almost from the day that they started. And the idea around the validated designs back then was that we needed to provide a prescriptive blueprint of how to do not just the design, but the install, the configuration, and best operational practices surrounding the software-defined data center. And those were the days before VMware Cloud Foundation even existed. We had this, if those that remember it, there was the vCloud suite of products, which was essentially a bundle of software capabilities. But they sort of, in terms of how you stitched it all together, how you built it, how you designed it, that was kind of left to you guys as the customer to work it out for yourself. And, you know, it just got so complex and complicated that we felt within VMware that we needed to drive something that at least gave you, the customers, the best way forward based on best practice, validated methodologies, etc. A lot of the team actually came from our consulting division, so we also had real world experience, so we were able to kind of use that to drive the validated designs. Roll the clock forward, 2 or 3 years later, Cloud Foundation was born. And those that aren't familiar, Cloud Foundation is really about an orchestrated and automated way of delivering that initial base platform, private cloud platform, to enable you to then deliver your application services on top. Now, these teams were very separate back in the early part of the sort of Cloud Foundation introduction. And it was quickly realized that actually there was a lot that we could do if we brought the validated design and the Cloud Foundation teams together. And so on the release of VCF 4, the validated designs essentially took VCF, SDC Manager, and everything it did as a first-class citizen. A lot of the architecture was driven out of what we've been doing on the validated design front. And so it was a natural progression for the engineering teams to start to build and deliver Cloud Foundation in the same way that VVD was in terms of the way its construction. So things like application virtual networks is a big thing that we had in the VVD that kind of evolved and became part of VCF. And now where we are today, we took a step back and decided that actually we were actually doing you, the customer, a disservice, because we now had this thing called a VVD. 6.x was the version line, and then we had VCF, which was the 4.x version line. They essentially one and the same thing in as much as VVD consumed VCF. But we started to get feedback from customers and field teams that there was confusion was starting to come in. There was duplicate content. Sometimes you find some content in one place that said one thing, and then you go to the VVD and it says something else. And that was starting to create a little bit of confusion out there in the customer world. So we decided that actually what we should do is, now that sort of the environments and the technology have moved on and VCF was actually doing a core chunk of what was in the VVD. So from an NSX, vSphere and vSAN perspective, that what we should do is think about splitting those out. So, consider VCF as the base platform. It's a known substance. It's a product. It's something that you buy, you license. We've got all those integrated workflows to help you build that base platform. And then anything else that sat on top of VCF will become a solution. And that's where the validated solutions come in. So the idea is that we build the validated solutions for VCF. So our target platform is VCF. So the prerequisite is that you have a Cloud Foundation environment deployed. And then we are showing you how to build and extend that platform by implementing a secure, highly performant and resilient infrastructure in terms of the solutions that sit on top, using the same DNA. Same way that we built the validated designs from the outset, that continues. So Andy called out there the design decisions. That's a big part of what we still do inside validated solutions. And in fact, even on the Cloud Foundation side, there are design documents that have been created specifically for VCF, which continue to maintain design decisions as part of that process. So in essence, what we've actually done is we've kind of taken the VVD and almost split it out into platform versus these solutions on top. So if we start to look inside, what is a validated solution, or what does it really bring to market? The first thing that we offer is really this faster time to value. We truly believe that what we've built in terms of the validated solutions accelerates you as a customer the ability to extend the capabilities of VCF. It helps to lower costs. We've got a lot of infrastructure as code that we've developed. So one of the neat things that we're trying to do is, in the whole brave new world of DevOps, we want to be able to accelerate that implementation even faster by delivering repeatable orchestration through infrastructure as code. And Ryan will talk about a little bit further when we get into the lower level. Secure. So clearly, one of the big things about VVD has always been, and Ryan's a big proponent of this, is least privileged access. So that continues to be a core focus of what we do inside the validated solutions, making sure that we're using least privileged access and not just, assigning everybody the admin right just because it's easy. Scale, again, goes back to the sort of the mantra we've always had with the validated designs is whatever we do, we need to be able to scale these things up. So we're looking to make sure that whatever we design is scalable, is repeatable, and validated in that manner. And then of course the big thing is the validated part. And this for us is about actually spending time implementing, putting this thing together repeatably over and over again. So we're actually doing the validation rather than it just being sort of, a hybrid thing or a snowflake that's built once. And we actually do this by using what we refer to as pipelines in the back end. So we are repeatably building our platforms using infrastructure as code on every new release of Cloud Foundation that gets to market. We go and reevaluate and revalidate across each new release to make sure that nothing breaks and that things still operate in the way that we expect. So best way to think about what a validated solution is it's a one-stop for validated capabilities that are delivered on top of VCF for customers and partners. The portfolio is vetted by us. Right now it is VMware only products. But we do have desires to start working with second and third parties to try and bring other solution providers in to start to build their own capabilities on top. It's built securely, it's highly available, as I mentioned, and resilient. And we actually launched these August last year, which actually is quite interesting because I'm not sure that many people knew about the launch last August, but it was obviously a big thing for us. And as I said, the idea is that we want to continue to build robust and repeatable solutions that are delivered on top of VCF. And a strapline that we like to use is we take just deploy to consumable. So there's a lot of things that VCF can do, and those that have actually used VCF or have got VCF deployed will know that you can deploy something through the SDC Manager UI, but it simply does that, it deploys it. And the solutions really try to take it to the next level. We try to sort of extend what you've got to make sure that actually when you've finished that implementation process, you've got something you can start using, and you can actually get value back to your business by using the product in the way it was intended. So The good news is that this is all free, just like validated designs. This is all free, no cost to our customers. It's complementary content that we provide and we ship alongside VCF. You can access it using that Go link there. And there's also a bunch of GitHub locations where we maintain the scripts. Always looking for contribution as well. And the key thing here is that what we're building with solutions is they are validated on top of VCF. So whilst our main target platform is VCF, there is an element of, if you don't happen to be a VCF customer, you could kind of take these designs and almost use them in some ways with a standard non-VCF environment, but we are really building for VCF itself. So in terms of content, what do we actually put into a validated solution? And this is quite key. So, we've always had architecture and design. That doesn't change. That's still a big part of what we do here. We still continue, as I mentioned, to have design decisions. So we have, why we're designing it, what the implication is for it. Implementation procedures is still there. So we actually shipped initially every solution with just UI procedures. So your traditional walk through the user interface step by step. And as I mentioned, infrastructure as code has been a big sort of thing that we've been investigating and looking at. And so the identity management and access solution, as a great example, was actually one solution that we went to market with last August with 100% automation. And that automation was delivered through PowerShell. And over the last 12 months almost, what we've been doing is continuing to add that automation into the remaining solutions. So the focus has been on implementation. And we have a PowerShell module which has been built specifically for driving the solutions. It's available on PS Gallery, so anyone can download and install it. Say the repository is open source, so if you want to contribute, you can. But what's interesting with that infrastructure as code is there's a lot of stuff we've had to do in there to drive what we do inside a solution, which actually means there's an awful lot of value in the PowerShell module, even if you're not doing a validated solution. There's a bunch of functions, low-level functions that we've had to create, like exposing particular APIs for NSX, or maybe an API for VLCM. And so we've wrapped that into commandlets, and we sort of layer up the infrastructure as code using those commandlets. So you can actually use the low-level ones without any kind of requirement for VCF being in play, or you can then use the actual commandlet that's focused on the procedure that you're actually following through for documentation. Time to deploy. Again, one of our key focuses here is we want you as the customer to be able to take these solutions, extend your VCF environment to deliver additional value. And we want you to be able to do it in a timely manner. We actually document in each solution the time to deploy, and that's actually calculated by literally stopwatch. How long does it take to walk through this UI procedure? The timings were done all based on UI initially. Now we have automation. The timings are based on executing those scripts. So each of the scripts, the commandlets, is a simple case of a few variables to control what you're going to do, and then you execute the command to perform the procedure. And there's error checking in there as well. So I think each one of these solutions, with the exception of the DR, we're talking hours, right, to actually implement these things. So if you've done the planning and you've done your prep work up front, actually going through the implementation process is a matter of hours for each one of the solutions that we currently have available. Infrastructure as code I've already talked about, and how-to videos. So we want to start to continue to build content where it makes sense to build content. So if you've got ideas, you've looked at these, maybe you've got some feedback, let your TAMs know. Your TAMs can get in touch with us if there's additional content that we need to start looking at, because if you feel it's the right thing for you as the customer, we'd love to hear about it. We'd love to know more. And customer success stories. We don't actually have any public facing success stories yet. A lot of people are using the solutions. We just haven't found customers that are willing to give us the sort of a formal customer success story at this point. But it's something that, again, we're trying to get access to. So if you as a customer listening today have found the VVSs to be really valuable, or maybe you've got a quote you're willing to share with us, again, please let your TAM know. Contact me directly if you like, gblake@vmware.com. We'd love to hear from you. So digging a little bit deeper, so that was kind of the overview of what each solution contains from a sort of high level marketing type material. But when you actually start to dig into each solution guide themselves, another thing that we've tried to do is to ensure consistency between each of the solutions. So, and what I mean by that is in the VVD world, we had lots of documents. And I mean lots of documents. So we had, the design document, which was one document. Then we had an implementation document. Then we had some operational based documents, things like password management or certificate management. We had a monitoring and alerting guide. And one of the things, again, that we took from sort of the last few years and sort of feedback from customers and field teams is there were too many documents. It was very hard to really kind of get the full picture, and you'd be jumping between different guides or trying to find different things in different places, and then there's a new version with every release and so on and so forth. So it gets to be quite complex. So one of the things we did was we decided to create what I refer to as a solution guide. So there is one place to get access to this content, which is through core.vmware.com, and we've got some screenshots to show you the layout of that in a bit. But more importantly, when you finally land in the content for the solution guide itself, you will find that we have a very structured approach. So each section has each guide has design objectives. There we call out, what is the solution, what we're trying to actually achieve, what's the capability, and then we define, what's being implemented, and then we there's a few other things in there around, which types of VCF, what domains are supported, for instance, is this support standard architecture versus the consolidated architecture. Then we've got design decisions, as I've mentioned already, very much VVD-like, clearly calling out why we're designing something, or why, are there any implications for doing it, that kind of thing. Then we have a section which covers the implementation. As also I've already mentioned, we can not only cover the UI, but we have this infrastructure as code. Operational guidance, and this is an area which we've actually for years wanted to try to expand on in the validated design world, but with constant change of products, we've found it really hard to be able to kind of really add more content. But in the operational guidance section, we're trying to expand further within that area of, what can we do to help you guys operate this? It's all very well to have, professional services or a partner come in, help you design it and build it, but then they leave. And at that point, it's you as the customer that's got to operate this thing. And again, what do you do when a certificate expires? What do you do if the password is going to expire because, the default is 90 days and someone forgot to change it? All those kind of things we start to try to pull together into the operational guidance. Solution interoperability has been an interesting area. So anyone that's familiar with the validated designs would have looked at that and gone, hey, this is a big monolithic stack with 7 products. And the idea of the solutions is that we've sort of broken that down into bite-sized consumable chunks. So if you're looking for intelligent login and you want to go implement LogInsight, then there's a solution to do that. But if you've now deployed intelligent login and you've also got identity and access management deployed, which gives you role-based access control for your VCF-based platform, what do you do to link those two together? If I now want to add intelligent login for the components that exist that were part of the IAM solution, and that's where the solution interoperability section comes in. And what we then do is we say, okay, if you are wanting to do login for this solution, then here are the additional design decisions, and here are the additional implementation procedures that you should need to follow in order to make that happen. And so they kind of look at them as optional pieces. So you either choose to add those or you don't. And then finally, within the solution guide, going back to Andy's comment about the design decision checklist spreadsheet that we used to maintain, what we've done now is with our solution guides, we've worked with our documentation team to have those design decisions placed into an appendix. So that rather than having to kind of jump through multiple pages within the content, you can simply go to the appendix, you'll see all of the design decisions in a list, and you can kind of walk through them very easily. Each solution also has a bunch of frequently asked questions. So if there's questions you have, I would recommend go look at those frequently asked questions as a good place to start. They're all on the Tech Zone site. And of course, if something's not answered there, again, reach out to your TAM. They can reach out to me and we can get that answer for you. So what do we have in terms of solutions? First of all, we have identity access management, which I've mentioned a few times, and Ryan will go into this in a bit more detail shortly. But the idea here is this is really about delivering role-based access control for the Cloud Foundation platform. So again, just to reiterate, the Cloud Foundation platform to us is vSphere, SDC Manager, NSX, and SDC Manager. Nothing more, nothing less. So the idea of this solution is it will help build role-based access control for that foundational platform. Developer-ready infrastructure. So this is all about enabling the Kubernetes Tanzu, whatever you want to call it, but Tanzu solution. What you need to do from an NSX point of view, what you need to do at the vSphere level. It's not just a case of clicking workload management inside SDC Manager and everything's going to be hunky-dory. There are a lot more things that you need to do to make this actually work, and the solution covers that in detail. Private cloud automation. So this is really about delivering a cross-functional application delivery platform using vRealize automation. And I don't know if anyone's actually noticed, a lot of the times I'm not talking about products when I talk about the solutions, and that's actually deliberate because the products that you consume to deliver a capability is kind of irrelevant in our opinion. It's more about what are you trying to do from a capability point of view. How do you want to extend your Cloud Foundation platform to deliver more benefits to your business? Underneath each of these solutions, yes, of course, there are products associated with them, but those products could change over time. So we're trying to make these more, say, solution business capability driven rather than focusing on any one product in particular. So we also now have NSX advanced load balancer. So this actually is an interesting solution in that it wasn't developed by our team. It was actually developed by our networking business unit. So the folks from Avi that we acquired a couple of years ago, they actually built this solution. They own this solution, and they worked hand in hand with us. They follow the same methodology, the same approach, the same standards, but they actually own their solution. Intelligent operations. This is about centralized monitoring. And if we have to be putting products in there, yes, it's vRealize operations. Intelligent logging. Again, it's all about log analysis at scale, and that is Log Insight. And then finally, we have site protection and disaster recovery. And so this is about delivering disaster recovery for your SDC management platform. But we also, something we never did before in the validated designs, we extend this to also talk about workload protection as well. So repeating essentially the site recovery manager vSphere application capabilities for your workload. So it's not just about protecting the management stack, it's also about building and protecting your business workloads on top. And then, as I said, in terms of sort of direction and where we're looking to go, we are really trying to drive solutions first and foremost on top of Cloud Foundation, trying to get our other BUs and other teams within VMware to join us and actually start to own their own solutions that sit on top of VCF. The Avi load balancer, advanced load balancer, or NSX advanced load balancer being a great example of that. And then ultimately, there's desire to try and have some third-party companies part of the ecosystem. VMware is very good with working with the ecosystem, and we'd love to be able to work with other partners out there to actually build solutions that, again, further extend capabilities delivered on top of VCF. From a landing site perspective, as I mentioned, all of this is actually available through TechZone. So the URL at the bottom there is the short URL, go VVS, will take you to TechZone, where we've got our validated solutions. Each solution is listed on this site as a tile. So this is illustrating that on the screen here. And then from there, you basically dig into the view resources. I think Ryan's got a slide. We'll show you the IAM solution in a bit, what that looks like below. Across the top there, there's a link to the blog sites. There's a link to frequently asked questions around the VVS itself. And there's also a link there to the GitHub PowerShell module that can be sort of explored and looked at as well. And with that, I will hand over to you, Ryan, and you can take us into a bit of a deep dive into identity access management.
Yeah, I'm going to share my screen if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, a lot easier for you to control.
Animations, etc. So I'm going to show a couple extra things. So one moment, share that and pop this guy up. And slideshow. I assume you guys can see that. Barry, you can confirm you see that?
Yep. I got it. Yeah.
Cool. All right. So let's talk about the identity access management for Cloud Foundation for this VVS, and the intent for this design, and kind of coming off what we were talking previously about the VMware validated designs. If you looked at the previous VMware validated designs, there were strands or streams of thought and touches upon identity access management throughout each kind of individual section throughout the former VVDs, and you kind of see those streams of consciousness and some design decisions and such. But as we transitioned over to the VMware validated solutions, one of the things that came to mind was we really need to start to put more of a focus on identity first, right? Like identity access management first. If you go build your platform, right, what are one of the recommended methods and deployment strategies that you can use based on an opinionated design, based on certain design factors that we have, like a single site, multiple site, and also thinking about where the products are today. But as engineering, right, you can look at some of our VMware validated solutions and you might see things that we do in the solutions, and you might go, well, why are they doing that? Sometimes there's a method to the madness that we might not be able to publicly share, where we know where the direction of the product is going, so we influence in the validated solution why something is there. And in particular, in this solution, I'll just mention that it happens to be the use of VMware Workspace ONE, or formerly known as Identity Manager, for the use of NSX, and we'll talk about that. But so we looked through as we built these solutions, we looked through and said, okay, let's think about how we can just show customers how to bootstrap identity access management, look at like least privilege, look at what is one of the most common patterns for identity providers out there, where are products today like vSphere having deprecated in vSphere 7 the use of integrated Windows authentication, IWA, right? And the recommendation to leverage things like AD over LDAP, which is very common for a lot of customers, but AD over LDAP-S, right? We want to be more secure. And so those are kind of what we thought when we started building this design. How do we help you bootstrap and secure the platform layer, give you better use of role-based access control, least privilege, password management, and any account policies and lockout policies for that core layer, and that core layer being vSphere, vSAN, NSX, and SDDC Manager. So As was being shown just a moment ago, this is a quick example. If you go to vmware.com /go/VVS, and I think this builds out, and actually that doesn't, shows you this is the identity access management solution, as you can find on that website. And when you go to the vmware.com /go/VVS, think about this as kind of a, an aggregator. Is kind of pointing you to the right, almost like a, God, people know what a mall is these days, like almost like a mall map. Like, here's where you are, right? And find the right location that you need to go to, right? And starting kind of, left to right and reading top down, you kind of go through the processes, but as you can find the details, whether it's, you want to look at the solution overview, you want to look at, design objectives or implementation states, you can find exactly what you need to regarding this design and each and every one of our designs. And as Gary mentioned before, we do show at the very top the estimated time of deployment based on our automation. On the details, you see the asterisk there. Details are actually down below screen, where we actually provide you more details about how we actually achieve those numbers in the example environment therein. But all this information from, again, design objectives, design decisions, implementation, planning and prep, frequently asked questions, which I highly recommend people look at. It's kind of like our release notes, but also a little bit of background on why we might have made some decisions, and some places where we do recommend deviations or we may not recommend deviations. Very important to actually read through those frequently asked questions. Think of it almost like release notes, if you will, right? So, again, we're really focused on in-depth solution guidance. So if you think about, that DNA of the VMware validated solutions, right? We had those detailed design decisions, which focused on having, what is the decision we're going to make, right? That's the decision, and we categorize that, mark it with like an identifier. Why are we making that decision, right, for this opinion design? And how do we justify it, right? And then what are the implications, whether upstream, downstream implications that might be made from this design? And as any good solution architect or engineer, these are kind of ways you need to think about how you design systems, right? Before you, I mean, it's one thing to do a POC and start kind of slinging software and installing it, but as like a POC, but when you really want to come up with a good solution, writing down the design decisions, justification, implications gives you ability to really kind of get the full view of what you're building and how it's going to look. It also helps other architects and engineers be able to look at what you have and be able to interpret it and get a mental picture super easy. And again, that comes from the DNA of the VVDs. In this identity access management, we have over 70 detailed design decisions, whether it's covering vSphere, NSX, or SDC manager, and the least privilege, and certificates and password management. We cover every bit of that into very nuanced details, so you as a customer can look and say, "Oh, I get that. I know how that decision was made." And now with all those, you may have certain business or technical reasons that some of those might not work, and you can deviate from those as necessary, but and use it either as is, right? Or you might have to perform some modifications if you have some special requirements that don't allow you to do that. So we have over 70 plus design decisions in this, and you'll see here, one of the things that we've also changed, we have the whole concept of UI procedures, as Gary mentioned. So this is an example. We have integrating in it. We'll talk about this in just a second. But in it, we integrate NSXT with a standalone instance of Workspace ONE Access, right? In order to kind of give us that brokered proxy to our IDP, right? And our IDP being LDAP over SSL. But we have those detailed manual procedures if you're a customer that is learning, right? One thing to learn, right? And you might be, and that's fair enough, right? You want to know those step-by-step procedures. How did you get to that point? And we document throughout the entire solution those detailed steps, right? But we also have that option to switch over to use a PowerShell based method. It's the exact same outcome, right? Just a different procedure in doing so. And we make it super easy, and I'll show you guys where you can actually get that PowerShell module, and where it is actually open sourced at the end of this session. So it makes it really easy. You know, pick the way you want to do it. Maybe you want to walk through it first, right? If you're doing like in a lab, maybe then walk through it again in the UI procedure. And the cool part about this is that those procedures, those PowerShell commandlets are reusable. So in the future, if you need to rerun that, you can rerun that. We have these low-level functions where you can set it, and you can set it, and maybe you can then unset it and then set it back, or you can kind of play around with those things, because sometimes it does become important to maybe do these twice depending on day 2 actions. So definitely check out the PowerShell methods to do so. Right, and those PowerShell methods, and it does increase the 167%, probably not the exact right representation of mathematical representation, but what was previously like an hour and a half or more manually, you can do in like 35 minutes now through the automation method. Right, of course, planning, you got to do your planning and preparation. Okay, so here we got Skylar, kind of give you an overview of what the kind of shape, the logical design of the identity access management looks like, right? So the first thing first, if you're familiar with Cloud Foundation, using Cloud Foundation, you have SDC Manager. It's kind of like the central nervous system, the central part of the nucleus of the SDDC, right, instance, right? And then of course you start with a management domain vCenter, and those are connected through SAML-based authentication between the two of these, right? So SDC Manager relies on your management domain, and then as you add workload domains, right, you can add up to 14 workload domains for a total of 15 today, and some of this may actually change in the future. So keep your ear to the ground with your TAM. Some of this may change in the future, but then you add workload domains, right? And those are in a single sign-on, enhanced linked mode environment. Again, keep your ear to the ground. Some of this may change in the future. No comments just yet on that, but we have this enhanced linked mode combination here and single sign-on. So if I, configure my management domain to use LDAP over LDAP-S, right? Active Directory over LDAP-S for a certain domain like rainpole.io, well, that gets inherited to all my other workload domains, right? Pretty basic stuff. But then you have to think about the concept of NSX managers, or NSX local managers, I should say. And you have local and global, right? But then they need to actually have the ability to connect to an IDP today. Now, if you're familiar with NSXV, back in the day, it used to connect to your PSC, right? Well, in order to get identity to work, right? For example, we have Active Directory services up there. We have this connected, we have LDAP over SSL, which is highly recommended by Microsoft. In fact, in the future, there's a TechNet article out there where they're actually going to eventually disable just plain LDAP and in the favor of LDAP-S. So we have in the design the use of LDAP-S. Now, in order to have the same use case, right? And looking toward the future of where VMware products are going from an internal engineering perspective, we actually also implement a standalone instance of Workspace ONE Access, formerly known as VMware Identity Manager. And that is also connected. So its IDP is LDAP over SSL or LDAP-S. And then the individual NSX managers, whether they're local or global, will use Workspace ONE Access as the identity provider, which is very important, especially if you ever think about using NSX Federation. Your locals and your globals have to use Workspace ONE, a common identity method. I do realize that NSX actually has native, I think it was as a 3.1, added native LDAP over AD over LDAP. But if you want to use NSX Federation, you need to use Workspace ONE Access. So do keep that in mind. And that's the logical topology of the solution. If we look at the kind of a network design based on our opinionated design, the example here, we have kind of a two-site, region A, region B. You'll see us use names and examples sometimes of a San Francisco and Los Angeles example. So if you see San Francisco and Los Angeles, just think about those as like region A, region B. But essentially, within your environment, you're going to have, Active Directory services. You have your enterprise network. You have your client devices, right? Your WAN, MAN, whatever your network connectivity is. But in your vCIF instance A, right, your first instance, right, maybe within a region, you're going to have your upstream connectivity, and connected to that, you're going to have your SDDC manager instance, which of course comes along with your management domain vCenter and your vCenter server and your workload domain vCenters, right? And they're going to be connected to your management network, which then in turn can connect to a cross instance NSXT tier 0 gateway, right? And below that, right, we're going to have a local instance tier 1 gateway. It gives us on-ramp with overlay back NSX segments, which is actually where we're going to put Workspace ONE. We typically put a lot of these management products beyond vCenter, beyond SRM, etc., on overlay backed networks, right? Or you'll see the term AVN used, or application virtual networks, used in our design, right? So this gives us ability to kind of, segment those off, put them in another zone, right? And in some instances for multi-site where we have failover and disaster recovery, we might want to be able to pick up an application, say it being VRA, for example, and move it over, but that's a different solution. And that's when we take the use of these overlay networks. And so on the other side, an instance B, and that instance B could be in the same data center, it could be in another data center, another region, right? We have a similar topology, right? With that instance having its own dedicated standalone Workspace ONE access instance connected to the local tier 1. Okay. So one of the things that we want to cover is, before we get into there, we really focus on LDAP secure, right? Identity AD over integrated Windows authentication is deprecated. We don't cover ADFS today, the use of ADFS. I'd be curious to know if any customers here are using ADFS, and if Andy can maybe, if you can provide that. I have done some work on the use of ADFS. It's not in this solution. If you are interested in learning how to use ADFS across the entire VCF suite, maybe Gary can post it to the chat. If you go visit 1030am.org, there is a blog post that goes into detail about how to use ADFS. It's not in the solution, but there is an option for how to implement that, and I have that detailed in my blog post. But we also focus on least privilege access, password management, and security. Least privilege access just means, like, listen, we're going to have, roles with specific privileges, which are then assigned to specific users or groups, right? And then those users and groups are going to then assign the correct level of permissions throughout the system. We focus quite a bit on lockout policies and account policies, right? When do passwords expire? When should they lock out, right? Let me just move this out of the way real quick. I'm sure you guys see that. When do passwords lock out? When, how often should they, what are the characters that you should be able to use between the different systems? Because if you look at, vSphere and NSX and SDC Manager, you kind of get these different variations, unfortunately, of the complexities of passwords and lockout policies. And we do help to kind of demystify that. We also help you understand when you start thinking about rotating passwords, right? What are the implications of rotating those passwords? We provide you some details, and I'm going to show you an example of something we have a preview of something we've created that we're considering open sourcing. I would like to get some opinions on that, either directly here on the Q&A or later. So let me pop over here in the functions. So we have a PowerShell module. It's called Power Valley Solutions. You'll be able to find it on the PS Gallery. It is open source. I'll show you where that is. But one of the things that we've really focused on driving that time to value, or time to deploy, was how do we make it just super simple to do these? So this is just a snapshot of, for example, from Workspace ONE, vCenter, the vCenter side of PowerShell commandlets that we've created that you can run to set and move create things like startup orders, cluster groups, anti-affinity rules, connecting AD to vSphere to AD, and doing that programmatically directly through this PowerShell module. it actually uses a module called Power VCF, which is a PowerShell module for interacting with Cloud Foundation through its native APIs. It also uses Power CLI on the back end. These are all custom modules that we've created to make this super simple and easy to deploy. We also have commandlets around directly connecting and creating roles within inside of SDDC Manager. We have ones for Workspace ONE Access. If you've ever tried to work with the APIs of Workspace ONE Access, it's going to be very complicated because a lot of private APIs there. So we created a module that kind of extracts that, makes it a lot easier for you to work with Workspace ONE Access, not only from just helping you to install it, that's up to initializing it, setting your SMTP configurations, adding directories, password policies, lockout policies, adding roles, makes it really, really super simple to interact with Workspace ONE Access using PowerShell for that deployment and day one configuration and even day two. We also have ones commandlets around NSX, right? How can I programmatically connect NSX to Workspace ONE Access? How can I programmatically set my authentication policies and add groups and roles from that IDP and do that programmatically? Really super easy. Having that at your fingertips so you don't have to do it through a UI is very helpful, especially for as your environments get larger and larger, not just for implementation but just for day-to-day operations. It's very, very important. And this is just a snapshot. There's a lot of other commandlets inside of this PowerShell module that not only give you the ability to set, you can remove unset items at times for a lot of these. So I want to give you a quick example of how kind of cool this is. So myself here, right, my cheesy avatar. Let's say, for example, I want to configure my password policies for my NSX local manager for my across the Cloud Foundation instance for a specific section. I think in this example, I think I do it for the NSX managers and edge nodes, right? So let's say, for example, I'm going to launch the PowerShell. I had that PowerShell module installed. I'm going to set a couple parameters, right? What is my VCF instance? What's my password? What's my user ID? What do I want the things like the lockout policy, reset policy, max attempts, and things like that to be? What do I want those standards to be? And then below, you'll actually see this set NSX manager authentication policy, right? That gives me ability to say, okay, well, what this will do is go and take those parameters, pass that to the commandlet, and the commandlet's actually going to go and connect to SDDC Manager. So SDDC Manager, I want to do this for a specific workload domain, being SFO MO1, the management domain. Tell me who the NSX manager is. Tell me the passwords to that NSX manager so I can get that from the credential store, and then allow me to go and provide that information back to the commandlet, and then have the commandlet go connect to the management domain NSX manager instance by getting that information from SDDC Manager and then configuring that policy. But let's say, for example, I then want to do that on my workload domain or multiple workload domains. Well, I want to have the same policy. All I have to do is change the target workload domain and rerun that command, and I'll get the exact same policy applied because I already have those variables stored, right? That's just a really quick example of how that PowerShell module works. Interacts quite a bit with SDDC Manager to get information like edges and managers and nodes and vCenters and credential stores, and to get that right information so it could then do the work and perform those deployments and add roles and security. So keep that in mind. Yeah, that's just kind of fulfilling the example flow here of we can actually do that on both and be all good to go. Animations are hard sometimes. So in general, I mean, the whole kind of summary of, we want to make this, these are solution level designs, right? We're not focused on like one big system level design, like a monolithic solution. We're really focused on like key capabilities, right? Bite-sized implementations that you can stitch together. Focuses on making that deployment, simplifying the deployment integrations, right? Making it more consumable, easier to read, not a giant walls of text, and making it very difficult to consume. Infrastructure as code, right? Giving you not only the UI procedures, but giving you the ability to use automation. Typically PowerShell and some areas Terraform being used. which I'm very passionate about, and having those repeatable processes that you can use not only day zero, but you can reuse through the lifespan of the environment. And of course, just to accelerate your initial time to deployment. And then again, as Gary mentioned, having that ongoing operational guidance, right? And so one of the things I want to show you, I'm going to switch over to my screen here. You guys can see that screen, I hope, the Safari screen.
We do.
Okay, so this happens to be the, just showing you, hey, this is, if you go to vmware.com/go/VVS, this is the screen you'll see. I'll bet I have it in dark mode here. You'll see all the solutions. If you go into identity access management, you're going to see all the details, right? Again, planning, design objectives, design decisions, be able to navigate to any of those real quickly. Again, showing you that we have those detailed design decisions throughout the system, right? With the decision, the ID, the justification, implementation that you can read through, and you get really a good understanding of every part of each design. You'll see the implementation. If you are looking at doing the automation, right, we'll provide you the guidance on how to install the PowerShell modules and any dependencies that might be needed, such as Power CLI and Power Valley Solutions. As you move forward, and for example, you go into an implementation detail, like for example, add an AD as identity provider, you're going to see that you'll see that UI procedure, but you'll also see that PowerShell procedure as an option. Right? If you are interested in learning more specifically about the PowerShell modules that we use, they are open source, and I'm going to show this real quick. So if you go to GitHub, to the VMware GitHub organization, look for the PowerShell module for VMware Cloud Foundation. This is the Power VCF module. It is open source. It is human readable. It's not compiled PowerShell code. You can read this. You can contribute to it. If you want to become a contributor into open source, we welcome contributions. Take a look at our contributing MD. We would love your insight. If you're a user of this and you have issues, you can file enhancement or bug reports, and we will happily take a look at that. And again, we love contributions. For the Power Valley Solutions module, right? We also have, you can get this. You'll get the link to the PowerShell gallery. Here, you'll see the latest version. This is the same example, the same method. One of the really cool things I'll show you is like same thing. Issues, bug reports, contributions are welcome. One of the cool things that's also added here is a sample scripts that Gary has worked on. So for example, identity access management, this is these PowerShell scripts here will actually consume the module, but in an end-to-end workflow, running these scripts can deploy the entire identity access management solution by running those, from deploying workspace one, configuring workspace one, to configuring vSphere and NSX, as you see how they're aptly named. And then there's the undo deployment option, especially if you want to run this like a nested environment test proof of concept. So those scripts are like super valuable, not only for the IAM solution, but for identity, the intelligent ops and developer ready infrastructure and intelligent logging and analytics. So do check those out. We encourage you to look at this. It's open source. We perform releases. We keep the documentation updated. The last thing I want to kind of just show you a quick kind of preview, because we do like to do a lot with automation and PowerShell. I mentioned like in the identity access management solution, we do a lot around like account policies, right, and lockout policies. I challenge first person on the phone that can tell me where in the Cloud Foundation products where I can get a complete view of all account policies and lockouts and pass policies for a system will win a $25 gift certificate to Starbucks. But no one's going to get that because it doesn't exist, right? But we're looking at, what if we could write a report that could be generated through PowerShell module? That will give you insight into your complete password and lockout policy across vCenter, across SDDC Manager, each of your ESXi hosts, right? What's your password policy on each of your ESXi hosts? What's your lockout policy set to? What are your NSX Manager password policy and lockout, right? Unfortunately, that doesn't exist in a unified approach today. We would love it to, and we're working toward that. But just to give you an insight of a PowerShell, just a real quick snippet of a component of a PowerShell module we're working on. I'd love to know if people think that would be interesting and something they would love to be able to run a report. You know, you have your great auditor comes up to you at some point and says, "Hey, I need to know how exactly the password policy and lockout policy for your entire, you know, SDDC estate. Can you provide that easily?" Well, this PowerShell module could help you do that, I think. We'd love your feedback on that. Any comments you have, provide them to Andy or whoever your TAM is. We'd love to hear some insight. So with that, I believe that was the end of the presentation, Gary.
Yep, it was. Yeah.
So we'll happily take any questions. How are we looking on the Q&A?
One
Yeah, so
question.
Couple things to
Sorry.
wrap up here too. One, you had the ADFS question, and I didn't want to distract any further than I already did, Ryan. Sorry about that. But
Sure.
so you had 9 out of 25 that responded that they are using ADFS, and the other 16 of the 25 that responded are not. Okay.
Okay.
And then Gary asked that we pop up a question here just regarding whether the attendees are already using the VMware validated solutions. So please do respond to that one as well. That's still on the screen here. It looks like we're actually pretty close to 50-50 right now. We'll close that in a second. And then as far as Q&A, it looks like just one question remaining. I saw several questions coming in that were all related to authentication or federation kind of capabilities. A lot of them are just basic vSphere questions. Where are we going with this? And Gary has responded to those individually. And then there was the one. So if you have other questions that you want to put in there, please do that. We'll spend a couple more minutes here taking those. I like the where you showed you both have the solution explained and then some code to implement the exclusion or the solution, sorry, is a lot like the security configuration guide, right? They've adopted that same methodology, and I find it really helpful. My customers find it really helpful. So, you know, it you give an explanation and you make it simple to implement it. So I really appreciated seeing that there. That's
you know what?
useful.
Yeah, I think for a lot of people that may be new to, you know, not everyone is a PowerShell, you know,
Right.
new to people are new to PowerShell. People are new to, you know, maybe, you know, starting out in their careers and they want to learn more. I think that's very it's a good way to kind of almost work in a logical perspective of, hey, how do I do that procedure? You could pop over here, right? And then how can I do it programmatically? And the cool part right here, let's say, for example, you really want to learn more, right? And like I said, it's, you know, add identity source. Well, that's a PowerShell. That's a PowerShell commandlet that we've written, right? But if you really want to understand, well, what's that actually doing, right? You have full power to go and look at this PowerShell module, right? It is open source. It's completely transparent. You can go in here and actually you can do a git clone and pull it down. But if I were to look at the raw, I can go actually look for that add identity commandlet, and it can actually see exactly what APIs it's running, what it's talking to. Especially if you're very conscious about, you know, just not running arbitrary code and you want to inspect and look at it. It's 100% human readable, open source. You can contribute to it. You can see exactly what APIs and functions are being used throughout, whether they're functions from Power VCF, you know, commandlets that are within here, or the ones that might be coming from another module like the SSO admin or Power CLI. You have complete introspection to see exactly what's being used. So we're not hiding anything. It's completely there in plain sight.
Right. Nice.
And it's a great way to, if you are also wanting to develop your own module, just from an education perspective, to understand how to create a module. You can use this as kind of like, hey, maybe I can take that, maybe I can fork it off and put some of my own stuff in there.
Exactly. You got a nice template to work from. Yeah. Nice. Good. Well, you see the results there, I think, for the poll, that it looks like 9 out of the 25 that responded are using VVS already, and the other 16 are not at this point. Hopefully after today, a few more will be doing that. And I appreciate that Ryan and Gary both mentioned several times throughout here to, have your TAM reach out to them if you've got questions or follow-ups or specific. And so this was really, really helpful content. I learned a lot today. I didn't really understand what we had here. And so this was valuable. I appreciate you taking the time to share this with us, Ryan and Gary. And for the rest of you, I really appreciate you joining. And please do join us next month, where, as I said, we'll be talking about vRealize Log Insight and vRealize Log Insight Cloud. And then, do be looking ahead at VMware Explorer. Hopefully, many of you are planning to attend that, and your TAM can be working with you on getting the most out of that experience as well. The content catalog is published for that, and so a lot of great sessions available, even remotely if you're not able to attend live. It's kind of a hybrid experience this year, and so be working with your TAM to get the most out of that time as well. And thank you much for your time today. We'll wrap it up, and your TAM can make the recording available to you after the fact.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, thank you, everyone.
Thanks.